All right, so today we're diving into something a little bit different.
Okay.
We're going to be exploring this idea of finding joy in being wrong. I know, it sounds kind of counterintuitive.
It does.
But trust me on this one. There's something really powerful here.
Okay.
We're basing this deep dive on an article called The Joy of Being Wrong, Embracing Discovery and Growth.
Okay.
Published January 12th, 2025. And it really got me thinking about a lot of things.
Yeah. It is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, we're so often conditioned to see being wrong as a failure.
Right.
But what if we kind of flip that script and we looked at it as a stepping stone to greater understanding?
Exactly. And that's what this article is all about.
Yeah.
You know, it tells this story about an 85-year-old researcher named Danny.
Okay.
And get this, he actually gets excited when his ideas are proven wrong.
Really?
I mean,
who does that?
Yeah, who does that, right?
Well, Danny, apparently.
Yeah.
And it's not just excitement, is it? The article mentions that he has like this whole process for unpacking his wrong assumptions.
Wow.
He jots down exactly where his thinking went off track and then revisits those old notes, almost like retracing his steps back to that fork in the road where he made the wrong turn.
So he's not just like celebrating being wrong just for the sake of it.
Right.
He's actually using it as a tool to refine his thinking.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
It is.
You know, it reminds me of when I was back in university.
Okay.
I was working on this research project.
Yeah.
And I was so convinced my hypothesis was right. I mean, I spent weeks poring over data, building my argument, you know, the whole 9 yards.
Oh, don't tell me the data proved you wrong.
Oh, completely wrong.
Wow.
And initially, yeah, it was a blow to the ego.
I bet.
But then I started digging into why I was wrong.
Okay.
And that's when it clicked.
Yeah.
I had overlooked this whole set of variables that completely changed the picture.
It's amazing how our brains try to cling to those initial beliefs, even when evidence contradicts them.
It's true.
There's all sorts of cognitive biases at play, confirmation bias, anchoring bias.
Yeah.
They all make it harder to let go of our cherished assumptions.
It's so true.
Yeah.
But it sounds like Danny has figured out a way to overcome that.
He has.
Instead of seeing being wrong as a threat, he sees it as valuable feedback. It makes me wonder, you know, is that part of what's kept him going as a researcher for so long?
It's a good question.
That ability to constantly learn and adapt.
I think there's a certain fearlessness in that approach, wouldn't you say?
For sure.
A willingness to say, okay, I got this wrong now. How can I use that to get closer to the truth?
There's something really liberating about that, right?
Absolutely.
It takes the pressure off needing to be right all the time.
For sure.
Which, let's be honest, can be exhausting.
It really can.
You know?
Yeah.
But it's like we're conditioned to think we need to have all the answers all the time.
Especially in a world where information is so readily available.
Right? Like you're supposed to have this instant expertise on everything.
Yeah, it's like we're all expected to be walking encyclopedias.
Right, and if we don't know something, it's like we failed somehow.
And that's just not realistic, is it?
Not at all.
I mean, nobody can be right about everything all the time.
It's impossible.
It is, and it's actually more harmful than helpful to pretend that we can.
Exactly.
Because when we're so afraid of being wrong, we actually close ourselves off to learning and growth.
You're absolutely right.
It's like we put on these blinders that prevent us from seeing different perspectives, from challenging our own assumptions.
And that's where the real joy of being wrong comes in.
Exactly.
But because when we allow ourselves to be wrong, when we embrace those moments of discovery, it opens up a whole new world of possibilities.
It's like taking off those blinders and finally seeing the world in all its complexity and nuance.
I love that analogy.
It's like stepping out of the black and white and into the full spectrum of color.
It's beautiful.
It is, and it's liberating.
So how do we actually cultivate this joy of being wrong?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
But I think it starts with a shift in perspective.
Okay.
Instead of viewing being wrong as a negative, as a sign of weakness,
Yeah.
we need to start seeing it as an opportunity for growth, as a chance to learn and evolve.
Like a stepping stone to
Exactly.
get us closer to the
That's
truth.
a process. It's not something that happens overnight.
Right.
It takes practice and patience and a willingness to be uncomfortable.
But the rewards are worth it.
Absolutely.
So let's dive into some practical tips and strategies for embracing the joy of being wrong.
Okay, I'm ready.
All right, let's do it.
Let's go. It does, and there's research to back that up, you know?
Oh, really?
Yeah, studies have shown that people who are comfortable making mistakes, they tend to be more resilient, more creative, and ultimately more successful in their pursuits.
That makes sense. If you're not afraid to fail, You're more likely to take risks, to push boundaries, to try new things.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm curious, isn't there a danger in being too comfortable with being wrong? Like, how do we balance that openness with the need to be accurate and make sound judgments?
That's a great question, and I think it gets to the heart of what we're talking about here.
Okay.
It's not about embracing wrongness just for its own sake.
Right.
It's about recognizing that being wrong is often an unavoidable part of the learning process.
So it's less about celebrating being wrong and more about using it as a catalyst for growth.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that our initial assumptions are often flawed or incomplete, and that's okay.
Yeah.
The key is to be willing to revise our beliefs when presented with new information.
I guess it's like that famous quote, the only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing.
Exactly. It's about having that humility, that willingness to admit when we're wrong, even when it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, this whole conversation reminds me of a project I worked on a few years back.
Okay.
We were developing this new product line, and we had this grand vision for how it was all going to unfold.
Oh.
But then, as we started getting feedback from potential customers,
Yeah.
it became clear we were way off base.
Oh, wow.
Our assumptions about what they wanted, what they needed, were completely wrong.
What happened next?
Well, at first, there was a lot of resistance.
Yeah.
We had invested so much time and energy into this initial plan, it was hard to let go.
Yeah.
But eventually, we realized we had two choices.
Okay.
We could cling to our flawed assumptions and watch the project fail, or embrace the fact that we were wrong and use that feedback to course correct.
Sounds like a pivotal moment.
It really was. We decided to scrap our initial plan and start fresh.
Wow.
Went back to the drawing board, talked to more customers, and came up with a completely new approach. It was a humbling experience, but ultimately it led to a much better product.
It's a perfect example of how being willing to admit you're wrong can actually lead to greater success. It allows you to adapt, to innovate, to find solutions that you wouldn't have considered otherwise. And it's not just about work projects, is it? This applies to our personal lives as well.
I completely agree. I think sometimes our biggest growth moments come from those times when we're forced to confront our own blind spots, our own flawed assumptions about ourselves and the world around us.
You're right. It's like we all have these internal narratives, these stories we tell ourselves about who we are and what we're capable of.
Yeah,
And sometimes those narratives can hold us back.
it's true.
They can prevent us from taking risks, from pursuing our dreams, from becoming the best versions of ourselves.
So how do we challenge those narratives?
Well, I think it starts with awareness.
Okay.
We need to become more conscious of the stories we're telling ourselves,
Right.
the beliefs that are shaping our perceptions and our actions.
And then what?
And then we need to be willing to question those stories, to ask ourselves, is this really true? Or is this just something I've been telling myself for so long that I've started to believe it?
It's like taking a step back and looking at our own lives from an outsider's perspective.
Exactly. It's about getting some distance from those narratives so we can see them more objectively.
And once we've done that,
Then we can start to rewrite those stories.
rewrite them.
Yeah, we can create new narratives that are more empowering, more aligned with our values and our aspirations.
That's powerful stuff.
It is, and it's not easy.
Right.
It takes courage and commitment to challenge our own deeply held beliefs.
But the rewards are worth it.
Absolutely, because when we let go of those limiting beliefs, when we embrace the possibility of being wrong, we open ourselves up to a world of possibilities.
It's like we're giving ourselves permission to grow and evolve.
Exactly, and that's where the real magic happens.
I love that. Yeah, it's like you can't see the picture when you're inside the frame.
That's a great analogy.
Right.
And speaking of seeing the bigger picture, let's circle back to Danny for a moment.
Okay.
Remember Danny,
Yeah.
a 85-year-old researcher?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the article ends with this really insightful quote from him about how the only way to be sure you're learning is to embrace those moments when your assumptions are proven wrong. It's like a litmus test for intellectual honesty, wouldn't you say?
It is, and it's not just about being honest with ourselves, is it?
Right.
It's also about creating a culture where it's safe to be wrong, to admit when we don't have all the answers.
That's so important.
Yeah.
If we're constantly afraid of making mistakes, of being judged or ridiculed, We're less likely to take risks, to voice dissenting opinions, to truly engage in meaningful dialogue.
And that can stifle innovation and creativity both on a personal level and on a societal level.
Absolutely. Think about all the scientific breakthroughs, the artistic masterpieces, the social progress that has been made because people were willing to challenge the status quo, to explore unconventional ideas, to risk being wrong.
It's almost like being wrong is a necessary ingredient for progress.
I think you're right. You know, if we were all right all the time, if we never questioned our assumptions or made mistakes,
right,
the world would be a pretty stagnant place.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought.
Okay.
What could you achieve if you weren't afraid to be wrong? What project would you tackle?
Yeah.
What conversation would you start?
What dream would you pursue?
Imagine the possibilities if we could all embrace the joy of being wrong.
The freedom that comes with letting go of the need to be right all the time.
It's a powerful perspective shift, and one that I hope our listeners will take with them as they navigate their own journeys of learning and discovery.
You know, remember, it's not about being wrong or right.
Right.
It's about using those moments of wrongness as opportunities to learn, to grow, to expand our understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep those minds open and those learning spirits alive.